So we're very excited to share this webinar with you. It is co-hosted with AATG, the American Association of Teachers of German. And this is part of the Teachers Association series that Avant has been partnering with various AATs. Our most recent one was with AATSP on inclusive language in the world language classroom. And many of you I know were there. I recognize a lot of the names, and it was quite a powerful one. So we're looking at possibly doing a 2.0. And then we had really wanted to talk about this specific topic because it's an important topic of creating pathways. Because for all of us lifelong learners, we're all lifelong learners of languages as teachers. We continue to hone our skills and learn new things. My background, and we'll get to it in a second, and then Roger, and then we'll have another one of our colleagues, Victor Santos, here. But we'll get started so we won't, hold anybody up. But so Victor Santos, Dr. Victor Santos is the Director of Research and Assessment at Avant Assessment. He has his PhD from Iowa State. Victor has an amazing company that he does outside of work for Avant called Linguacious. If you don't know it, you should look it up. He actually produces children's books that are for purposes of creating more bilingual children. He himself is Brazilian, his wife is Ukrainian, and he wanted a way for his children to learn all of the different cultures in their house, as well as, of course, English, living in the United States. So he developed these books, and they're translated into over 20 languages. So if you go to that site, Linguacious, it's a shameless plug, but part of this is to show that, lifelong learning is something that we all really buy into and something we really want to support. So Victor will be here a little bit later. My colleague Roger Burt, lives in Utah. He works with K-12 in numerous states, mostly in the West, but some in the Midwest. And he himself is a former high school Spanish teacher. Well, I guess you're always a teacher. He's just currently not teaching. Levels 1 all the way through AP, as well as IB, in the Davis School District in Utah, which is right outside of Salt Lake City there. So Roger will be talking a little bit later about his experience and some things he actually did in his program that could be beneficial. And then there's me. My name is Nick Gossett. I am the higher ed specialist, so I work with all of the institutions of higher ed with Avant. I also work with our European colleagues, and I'm over credentialing and badging. So part of why I'm hosting this webinar has to do with this connects with credentialing and badging with the American Council on Education certification that the STAMP test just received. But it all kind of ties in together to create these pathways to keep building these lifelong language learners. My education is from the University of Texas. I already said that to someone who is teaching German from Texas, and I don't know if they're Longhorn or Aggie or something else, but that's where I did my graduate work. And then I'm a former assistant professor of Russian and applied linguistics at the University of South Alabama. I did take German as my non-Slavic language in grad school. And it was a very interesting time. It was taught by another graduate student in German. So it was actually a really good experience. So my German is awful, so I apologize to everyone at AATG. But we're glad that we could do this with AATG and really open it up to everyone out there. So when we talk about these K-16 pathways and creating these lifelong learners, we have to think about the stakeholders involved. At the macro level, we're talking about these K-12 districts. We're talking about institutions of higher education. We're talking about these state departments of education. And as cliche as it may sound, society in general are stakeholders in creating these pathways and having these lifelong language learners. At the micro level, it impacts individual businesses. We're looking at individual K-16 language programs, individual teachers, parents who are involved in these programs, and students themselves. So when we think about this topic, we have to really consider all the stakeholders involved, because it's important to know who we're talking about as we go through this. So let's ask ourselves, what is our goal? how can we meet the needs of these stakeholders? And how can we meet the needs of society? Our goal as language educators is to develop global citizens who will work to meet the needs of society. Our society is ever changing. In the US alone, in the last few years, we've had enormous changes that we maybe haven't seen in decades. We have growing populations of speakers of languages other than English. I'm sure many of you remember the report from the Arts and Sciences Association that stated that it's America's languages. We don't call them foreign languages because to over 30% of the population, Spanish is not a foreign language. It's their native language. It's their home language. So to call something a foreign language is a little bit, it's a misnomer. So we have to think about this overall picture as we talk about this topic. But there's a great disconnect that we all see, we talk about. There's papers out there about it, there's been presentations about it. We have these highly proficient graduating seniors coming out of high schools, the increasing number of heritage learners in all languages, not just Spanish, but all languages, as we have these movements for dual language programs and heritage language programs, you see this increasing number of heritage learners. And the industry has identified a need for multilingual workforce. These reports have been put out by numerous industry leaders, numerous presses, Forbes, Bloomberg, they all talk about the need for multilingual workforce. But the great disconnect is that we see declining college language course enrollments. We see the closure of language programs, not only at the higher ed level, but in K-12. And we start to see non-language departments offering language courses. This primarily happens at the higher ed level, but these are the things that we're seeing. So there's this great disconnect where there is this need, and there are these amazing speakers coming out of school, but on the other end, we see the impact this has had. Well, we see the issues that we see at the higher ed level, that we have to somehow connect these two together. So we have to look at some pathways forward. One could be accepting the syllabi literacy. One could be proficiency-based placement. And another could be bridge programs with a consortium of higher ed institutions. And so my colleague Roger will speak about these because he has direct experience and knowledge with each of these in his own teaching and in his own state of Utah. So Roger?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So yeah, I'll address those three areas where we see K-12 institutions trying to connect and make those connections with higher ed. And like you said, I've got some experience with each of those from my teaching days. And the first thing that we'll look at, excuse me, is earning the syllabi literacy. So the syllabi literacy obviously was designed to demonstrate to employers and institutions of higher education that a graduating high school senior is biliterate, bilingual, or multilingual in a lot of cases, and to help them gain an advantage for those skills that they have that will help contribute to the workforce and society. So some challenges that we see with state seals of biliteracy are that they generally can't be awarded until graduation. So many K-12 institutions wait until a student's senior year to test them, making it a pass-fail situation instead of using data to set goals for growth and to visualize the path towards the seal. Another challenge is that each state has different requirements, and some states don't specify a level of proficiency that needs to be attained in order to earn the seal in the first place. And that makes it a little more easy to understand why some higher ed institutions might be reluctant to recognize seals of biliteracy for credit or placement, especially for students who are coming from other states where those institutions may not be as familiar with the requirements or the ways that the seal can be earned. And the global seal of biliteracy helps with this in a few ways. It can be awarded as soon as it's earned, and it is awarded at 3 different levels, beginning at intermediate mid in all 4 skills, and then advanced low in all 4 skills, as well as advanced high in all 4 skills. So this way, adding the global seal to your state seal can help identify where your students are in their language skills. We also see a lot of students are qualifying with the AP test, which is great, but the difficulty with that is that the results don't come in until the summertime. I know with my program here in Utah, we don't get results until around the 4th of July. And so for those graduating seniors, they've already graduated, college applications are in, hopefully they've been accepted. And so that makes it a little more challenging. One way that the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools is trying to work around some of those challenges is they purchased stamp tests for all school districts in the county for any student to qualify for the seal. They then incentivized them to test early in the school year and held a ceremony in October for those who qualified, so that way those students could identify on their college applications that they've earned the state and or global seal of biliteracy. And it also gives those students who didn't qualify early in the school year the chance to look at their data, see where they can improve, and test again later in the school year and hopefully qualify later in the year. Another approach that we're seeing, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Another approach we're seeing is institutions placing students in the most appropriate course based on their level of proficiency. And this is something that I did when I was teaching for a few reasons. One was to better engage our native and heritage Spanish speakers who in far too many programs are being placed in Spanish 1 because it might be the first time that they're taking a Spanish class, even though that's in the overwhelming majority of cases not in their best interest. It's not their best fit. I also wanted a way to better individualize learning for my students. Some would enter a particular level. For me, it was most obvious in level 4. They would either come in way above or way below the proficiency benchmark that we had for our level 4 classes. And it just didn't seem in the best interest of those students to have them in a class that was either too challenging or not challenging enough, especially if we wanted to retain them as students in our programs and help them reach the highest levels of proficiency that they could or that they wanted to. A challenge that we have with this is students that have higher levels of proficiency, they can quickly run through all of the language offerings that a school or district has. And so that would force them to either start studying another language, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it may also drive them to stop taking language classes altogether. And that was a problem I could see coming when I started placing students based on proficiency. So fortunately, my district supervisor, and I know a lot of you probably know Bonnie Peterson, she was my district supervisor. I was a very, very lucky teacher, but she was and is very data driven. If we could look at the next slide. Thank you. So now we'll kind of go backwards to my first year teaching. I took over an AP class in the middle of the year, which kind of made me the perfect guinea pig for Bonnie to test out a theory that she had. She had a theory about stamp test scores and AP test scores and how they might be related. So in the data here, we can see stamp test scores of the students that were in my AP class. And based on their composite score, we made an AP score prediction. So Bonnie's theory was that if a student was intermediate mid as an average or a composite score, then they would pass the AP test with a 3. And if they scored 6 as their composite score or intermediate high, they would be more likely to earn a 4 on the AP test. And if they scored advanced low or 7 on the stamp test, that they would be more likely to earn a 5 on the AP test. So you can see there we got the scores, we identified their predicted AP scores, and then let's see, so we took the stamp test in February, took the AP test in May, and then in July we got the scores back, and you can see how the students performed, and it was really, really accurate. And so that was exciting. And you can see Matthew down there at the bottom was not predicted to pass, even though he was really close. And looking at the data, I was able to make some specific plans with him as far as things that we could do in class and things that he could do outside of class to boost his odds of passing the AP test. And we saw this correlation continue my second year as well, and beyond. It actually held true throughout my entire career, and not just in my class, but in all of our DLI classes and all of our secondary world language classes. The students in AP who reached that level of intermediate mid or higher passed the AP test. So as we saw that, we had a lot of questions come to mind regarding other things that we might be able to do with the data. So seeing that students are passing the AP test at intermediate mid, we started to think about our proficiency goals and benchmarks at level 4, at level 3, and so on and so on. And if we started to test more classes than just AP, could we maybe identify students who are ready for the AP class and test without following the traditional path of Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4, and then AP, which led to our AP classes being pretty much exclusively seniors. If we could look at the next slide. So this data is from the first year we tested more than just my AP students. This is my Spanish 4 class, and hopefully the next year's AP students. And so as I look at the data, I could project where they might be the following year. And so as we look at this, the reading is looking good. They're at that intermediate mid plus generally. Writing, I think, is looking good because I'm just assuming as a first year teacher, or I guess at that point a second year teacher, but with another year in the program and in an AP class, that their growth will be where it needs to be for them to be successful. But listening and speaking really jumped out at me, and I wasn't sure what I could expect as far as growth within a year, because I'd only tested AP students with STAMP up to that point. So I went to Bonnie, my district supervisor, to ask if there was professional development or some workshops or something that I might be able to attend to help get these scores up. And she was happy to help me with that. And then I was able to move forward, making some adjustments. So I also hoped to use the data to show students who didn't consider themselves AP students that they really were, and to try and retain those students to grow the AP program and our Spanish program. So as we started to place students in the most appropriate class based on their proficiency, we quickly noticed that there were many incoming high schoolers, and I say that in the Utah way. In Utah, high school is the building that houses grades 10 through 12. So incoming high schoolers, I'm referring to sophomores or 10th graders. But we noticed that a lot of them were ready for AP based on their proficiency. And so that made me wonder, what options are we going to have to create for those students who would pass AP as sophomores or even as juniors? Because we had international baccalaureate, but not everybody was interested in that. And I thought it was our duty to have something else available. And that's when Bonnie told me about the bridge program that we have here in Utah. And I knew about it, but not some of these specifics that we'll talk about. So Nick, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. The bridge program for advanced language learning is the continuation of the DLI program. So traditionally, you might be thinking of a DLI program as K through 8, maybe K through 9. But here in Utah, DLI students take the AP test in 9th grade. And then to literally bridge the gap that we're talking about, this program brings a university professor to the high school classroom to teach an upper division college course with the high school teacher to the students in their own school. They teach one course per year, and it's on a 3-year rotation. So a 9th grader who passes the AP test can take 3 upper division courses throughout their high school career and graduate with very nearly a minor in the language, which is a great opportunity for them. And so Bonnie told me that as they designed the bridge program, the only prerequisite to enter was having passed the AP test. And now all of a sudden that gives my students a pathway to continue studying the language beyond AP. In my case, students did have to go to another school where bridge classes were being taught because my school didn't receive DLI students directly. Now there is a bridge class at my school because there were so many students entering the bridge program through multiple pathways. We started a Spanish for Spanish speakers class, and initially it had to be combined with my AP class because there weren't a whole lot of students. And that ended up being a great opportunity because those students in the Spanish for Spanish speakers class were exposed to the AP test, saw what it was like as we did our practice AP tests and how scoring was done. And they thought, well, shoot, I can pass this, and there's potentially college credit available for doing that. And I said, yeah, there is. And they were excited. And so then knowing that there's this connection with the bridge program, that was even more exciting. And so now we had native and heritage Spanish speakers taking the AP class and entering the bridge program. And then we also had secondary world language students who are learning Spanish as a second language, taking and passing AP earlier, and then entering the bridge program in addition to those DLI students that was initially designed for. So like I said, this is a great way that we're connecting K-12 and higher ed here in Utah. And in my opinion, it's a great model that others will hopefully follow and continue to improve upon.
Great. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is there's a misunderstanding and a lack of communication. That typically doesn't happen with the language teachers. That happens at a higher level between admin and terminology. We also have resources and competing priorities. But if we go back to the misunderstanding and lack of communication, the word credit is a charged word. Everybody wants to say the word credit, but at the higher ed level, that can be problematic because credit is tied to money, which is one reason why high school kids, the high schools and their parents are also interested, because having those advanced credits can save you money, quite a bit of money, because college is not, and it's very expensive. So there's a misunderstanding of what that actually means. And each institution, unfortunately, has their own policies. So each institution handles it differently. Some may handle it as you come in, you get this retroactive credit if you take a language class. Some give them the credit and waive the student needing to go to language class at all because resources and competing priorities. So there's a missed opportunity here, a very huge missed opportunity. But how can we bridge this gap, and how can we, to use the word bridge again? A way forward is using assessment results. They provide evidence of proficiency. They place a learner directly into a program, and they assist in aligning feeder programs. The project that Roger was talking about, the bridge program, they might as well call it a feeder program because that's what it is. These kids take these classes at one of these, is it 5 or 6 institutions, Roger? I think it's.
And now you put me on the spot. I can't remember how many we have here.
It's a good number. It's 5 or 6 institutions. Those institutions then have other programs they offer in language for specific purposes that students can then enter after taking this bridge program without having to start at Spanish 100 or even 200, because they understand where these students are coming in at. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine a world where K-12 students are directly recruited into higher ed language programs, where we know who's coming in, we know when they're coming in, what languages they're in, what their abilities are, and what they can do. Higher ed language programs then predict enrollment, which helps with resource allocation and proficiency of incoming students. Now, I know predicting enrollment is a slippery slope. It's not very easy. We know there's an enormous demographic shift coming around the year 2025. It's in all the higher ed papers, but there are ways to, in a way, predict if you'll need to add another 100 level section, or if you can take that person's, you can take that one class they can teach and put them in another level to increase the number of majors and minors. We'll have more people graduating with language skills in various fields. If a student can come in and directly jump into a minor or a major or a 300 level because they have that intermediate high basis that you need for a lot of these LSP programs, then they're more liable to stay with that language because it's not too many more classes to get a minor or a major or a certificate, which benefits the program, it benefits the student, and even these other non-language programs are interested in that because it makes their graduates more employable. You know, I'm sure you've seen all the data that comes out that JNCL sends out, that, you know, a number of organizations send out. Speaking a second or third language on the job is profitable. In fact, the most recent report I saw had said that the highest average salary was because of people who could speak German and then Portuguese. So shout out to AATG, because people that speak German that go into the job market have statistically higher salaries. The workforce is better equipped to fulfill the needs of society. We have growing needs in healthcare, in the legal system, and numerous other areas that touch our citizens, not just here, but around the world, and they can be better equipped to deal with that. The benefits are this frees for the higher ed, this frees up resources in 100 and 200 level courses. If you're not having to offer so many of the general ed courses, you can put more resources into 300 level specific purpose courses, into expanding programs. Maybe someone can use that FTE to do some of the recruitment, to, you know, be more closely involved with advising. You can, again, create new programs to meet the needs of incoming students and society, as we've said. If you think about the program in Utah, if they know they have 20 kids coming in and those 20 kids are interested in, I don't know, the legal system, they could work with other entities at the institution to create a legal Spanish class. Some institutions have done that already. There's a criminal justice program at CSU San Bernardino that is a really great program, and it's really benefiting the students and their local community. You can increase enrollments in those upper level and content courses, which leads to increased numbers of majors. You can create and expand partnerships across campus and throughout the community. If you're providing these students that have these language abilities right out on the job market, that helps community partners, that helps the industry partners that already partner with the university, but maybe through another field. For example, the university I worked at, Airbus was in our city. They were, of course, getting engineering students to be interns. But what if those engineering students were able to add on a German or a French speaking ability to their skills? They're even more employable, and it's even more beneficial for Airbus. And it can help you apply for grants. Assessment data and assessment plans are a major part of grants. Those of you who have reviewed grants, applied for grants, you know that's a major point there. They don't typically cover assessment, but they want assessment to be part of everything you do in that grant. They want to know why you're doing it and how you're assessing it. So having this data and knowing where your students are coming in, where they're going, really can benefit departments at the higher ed level. So great, how do we get there? We mentioned all this. There's got to be better communication between K-12 school districts and higher ed programs. I know that's easier said than done. Everybody's busy, you know, a lot of times in both K-12 and higher ed, language programs are not given the most power or even listened to a lot of times. But all it takes is one or two teachers, one or two passionate people to get this started. That's how things like the Global Seal happened and the State Seal. One or two people felt passionate about something and pushed for it. Higher ed programs can develop pathways based on proficiency levels. If you know students are coming in at intermediate, mid, intermediate, high, based on assessment data, based on your own assessment data, knowing where your students are in your program at that level, it's easier to create pathways to feed them into your programs. And incoming students and parents are more aware and well informed of pathways. Unfortunately, you cannot depend on college advisors or admissions to play a role. Their job is to get students in and get them out in 4 years. It's all about statistics at that point. And so if they know a student doesn't need to take a language, they typically don't ask them to or find ways around it. And so having these pathways and having these pathways defined and publicized with your feeder schools and other programs you know work with you, that can help inform parents when their kids go. And then it starts with assessment. What proficiency level do students need to enter certain courses and programs? Do you know that right now? If you're sitting there thinking about your program, do you know the proficiency level your students need to be in certain courses or programs? How do you know students are reaching these levels now? Is it just because the textbook you use says it goes to intermediate high? Is it because you think intermediate high is when you start using the subjunctive or some grammar point? Why are we not using external validated tests to measure proficiency? There could be a number of reasons for that, but that really is one of the best ways to really see where your current students are and the possibilities for your future students and for your program. And it's perfect timing that Dr. Santos has joined us now, because we can talk about how we get started with that. So benchmark testing of current students, testing incoming students or accepting results from tests they've taken before enrollment, like the test they take for the state or global seal, using the ACE, the American Council on Education, credit recommendations to assist in placement. We're going to talk about each of these right now. So when we talk about benchmark testing, a number of institutions have started to do this more. They test in their current students at specific points in the program. For example, the end of a semester, the end of a sequence, the end of a requirement, the end of a minor or a major. Some people only test the end of their major. Well, at that point, if you're testing your students in their 4th year at the university, how do you know, what if they don't score high enough to get a global seal or to get out of the program where you think they should go? Had you had benchmark testing throughout the program, you could have identified those gaps and assisted the student, incorporated more resources. This could be at the student level. It could be at the program level. If you don't have the data, you don't know. A number of institutions have started replacing final exams with these external validated assessments. This helps them gather program level and course level data. It also frees up your faculty from having to grade a final exam, and it can start to help you position your program to be proficiency based. You know at what level students should be coming out at 100 level, at the 200 level, at the 300 level. So when you start creating new courses and new programs, you know what you can build those courses to. If you know a majority of your students coming out of 200 level or intermediate mid, then you know your 300 level and maybe your content courses that start then can be geared towards that level or bridging that gap to get them to that intermediate high. And not only does benchmark testing provide official proficiency results for students, which are always good, it can help programs align to proficiency, as I said, set these goals, and you can track progress towards those goals. It's also an incredibly amazing way to recruit and retain students. Showing them a score report of where they are and where you can get them if they continue in your program is very powerful. Visuals speak quite a bit. And so I think benchmark testing is one way you can start here. Let's benchmark test, see where we are. So as students come into your program with these levels of proficiency, you know exactly where they go into your program. Again, I know it's easier said than done, but there are ways to do this where it's not a financial cost, a high financial cost to the institution or the student. Placement and advanced placement, and I don't mean AP, I mean advanced placement within a course. So testing incoming students, accepting results from recent tests. And we just talked about benchmark testing, but this can be done before benchmark testing. And you're asking how? If I don't know where my program is now, or I don't have 100% idea where my students are now in my program, how can I do this? This is what we're here to talk about. The American Council on Education recommendations for credit. All of our STAMP4S tests and our Arabic proficiency test have been recommended for credit at different levels. So we start at novice high, and so the recommendation is that a novice high score would be a 4-semester credit hour recommendation. Now, let me explain ACE real quick for those of you who may not be so familiar. The American Council on Education is an external governing board that credentials and works with over 2,000 institutions. That credentials the AP, it credentials CLEP, and it credentials Avant STAMP and APT tests. And it recommends credit for these tests or for classes maybe a non-traditional student took outside of a high school program or outside of a test. Again, the word recommendation is very important here because it doesn't mean the institution has to follow this by the letter. It's a recommendation for what possibly may line up to your program. It doesn't mean you have to give them these credits. You could have a system where, okay, we know you're coming in with intermediate low, so that's 6 credit hours. So that's coming into our 200 level. So you can come into our 200 level and we'll either waive those other 2 courses, or we can get retroactive credit when you pass the intermediate level. Depends on how your institution works. So what I want to do now is I'd like to allow Dr. Santos to talk about the process for how we gain this ACE recommendation and what it could possibly mean to your program. So Victor, if you'd like to go ahead.
Well, thanks, Nick. First of all, I want to say hello to everybody wherever you are. I'm talking from Iowa, the Midwest. I know half of you are extremely jealous of the rain that we probably have here right now, but it's a pleasure to be here with you. As Nick was saying, we recently got the accreditation by ACE, and it's a very, I call it a very grilling process. The whole process takes about 3 months, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to share some slides. And it's also important to note that basically what ACE is recommending, the number of credits that different institutions should give in order for students who achieved a certain STAMP level, that's if the student achieves that specific level across all 4 skills, right? So the student has to achieve the level in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So for example, if they achieve novice high over writing, reading, listening, and speaking, ACE recommends that they get 4 credits. If they achieve intermediate low, which is a STAMP level 4 across reading, writing, listening, and speaking, ACE recommends that they get 6 credits. So let's look a little bit at how the process works and how that can be useful to you. I'm going to try to share my screen. As long as I send that money to Nick's account. No.
I got the Venmo. Okay. You can go.
Let's try to share it now. Hopefully my computer won't blow up. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. So basically, the ACE review took about 3 months, and these were the 4 people that were the most heavily involved. So Mari, Kyle, me, and Bill, basically we lead the teams that together create STAMP and make sure that STAMP is working the way that it should, that it's a valid test whose scores can be used for various purposes. So Mari Ennis is the director of rater management. So Mari oversees more than 300 raters that we might have at Avant, working on all of the different STAMP languages to make sure that they're rating appropriately, that they're hired with the correct qualifications, etc. So anything that has to do with rating and the quality of the rating, the levels in writing and speaking, Mari is the person that manages that. Kyle Ennis is the Senior VP of Products and Technology, so he's behind pretty much everything that happens at Avant. Some of you may have already interacted with some of these players, depending on what you have done. I'm the Director of Research and Assessment, so I'm very closely leading the team that deals with the statistics behind the test, all the research that goes into the test to make sure that it's working the way that it should. And Bill is the Vice President of Content Development. So Bill works with all of the great target language experts that we have at Avant for each of the different languages to write the items, to find the passages in reading, in listening, etc. So these are basically the 4 people that were part of the team that was part of the ACE review. And I'm the point of contact, meaning that I was in charge of collecting all of the information in order to submit to the review. So just to give you a little idea of what the grilling ACE review process entails. So basically, we have 2.5 months to put together a whole dossier. It's basically an audit of STAMP4S and APT to make sure that they open every single hood under the test in terms of research, in terms of content, in terms of the qualifications of the people involved in the process, in order to see if we deserve that accreditation or not. So for about a week, towards the very end, once the dossier is sort of ready, the portfolio, these are some of the things that the ACE team is looking at. They look at the qualifications of every single Avant personnel involved in the development and administration of the test. They look at the raters for writing and speaking for each one of the languages that we have. If somebody's rating, for example, STAMP4S Polish, do they have the language skills and the background necessary to be an Avant rater? Have they gone through the training? Is the training valid in order to make sure that they're rating correctly? The target language experts to collect the passages and write the items, reading and listening, the content team that works with Bill, the research team. The proctors that are making sure that the students are taking the test in a way that doesn't involve cheating, for example, if you take it online, right? So all of this, the way we train our proctors, the way we select them, the processes in case one proctor is not working, all of that is completely open to the ACE team. The other thing that they do for each one of the languages that we submitted is these are people that usually have a PhD in the language, and they have decades of experience teaching at the undergraduate and many of them at the graduate level in each one of the languages. So everybody who's part of the ACE team, they're basically really experienced in teaching that language that they're looking at. So for example, if it's STAMP4S Spanish, it's going to be somebody who's is familiar with the actual scale, has taught at the undergrad and graduate level for quite a while. These are the top talent that they're recruiting to look at our test. Each one of these people will take a look at the sample test that we have on the website to make sure that we're providing enough information to the students so that they come in and take the test knowing what is to be expected. For example, we have all of the sample tests on the website. For writing, we give an idea to the students of, if you're taking, let's say, STAMP4S Hindi, this is what a novice low looks like in Hindi, the kind of language we're looking for, right? This is what an intermediate mid looks like, so that the students understand that when they take the test, they really have to give their best and provide language that is similar to what they're seeing in those examples. So they take the test, they look at the content, they look at the scores awarded, right? Because one thing is for us to say that the STAMP4S is aligned with the actual scale. And it's another thing for one of these reviewers to come in and say, okay, I took your test. I know exactly the level of the questions that I saw. I know whether I got them right or wrong. And you gave me a score of 3. You're saying I'm a novice high, when in fact I should have been treated as an advanced low. So that would be something, of course, that would hurt the accreditation. So these people are making sure that the scores they receive at the end of each of the 4 sections align with their understanding of the actual scale. All of the public facing and internal documentation that we have on the website is given to them about our processes, test maintenance, comparability of test results across time and forms, our test review processes, how often we refresh the test, the kinds of statistics that we use, etc. And the other thing that we have to do is when you think, for example, of writing and speaking, we rate thousands of responses across those languages. We have to give every single one of them to ACE. So if we're talking, for example, of STAMP4S Hindi, for example, or French, we have to show them every single response from a test taker we've scored with the response that the test taker gave, with the score that our raters gave them, so that a reviewer is able to say, okay, this language the student provided is not a stamp level 4. It should be a stamp level 6 according to the actual scale. If that were to happen, that would be an issue. We got the accreditation, so we're lucky, given our processes, that they agree that the scores we're awarding at the end are correctly aligned with the actual scale. But that's the level of opening the hood that ACE requires. Here's an example of our test design, some of which you may have seen before. So instead of using a linear test where everybody, regardless of their language proficiency, takes exactly the same test, Ours is an adaptive design. Everybody starts with the same level of questions. Depending on how they do, they will get a harder batch of questions. If they don't perform as well here on the first set of questions, they go down. If they don't perform as well here, they go down to this bin. So all this is something they're looking at, right? If we're sending people up here after they kind of fail towards the beginning, these questions statistically and in terms of content, their alignment to the actual scale, they have to be harder in terms of the proficiency required than all of these questions that are here in bin 1, right? Because otherwise the test is not working well. If you look at the statistics, you look at the content, and what we're calling intermediate questions are actually easier than the novice questions on the test. What we're calling novice, that would be an issue, right? So we have to open the hood and make sure that they have access to all of our information. For example, they look at the validity behind the test, right? Are we able to defend the use of the scores of STAMP4S? If you go to our website, there's a document under the research tab called the development of a stamp, the development of a stamp test, support for test validity. And there we explain the 10 steps that every single STAMP4S test goes through during development, the kind of maintenance we do, and how we refresh the test year after year to make sure that students are not seeing the same questions over and over again. They also look very closely at the statistics. This is something that they care about a lot, because it's one thing for a test to look nice and seem like it's working in terms of content, but you need to have some sort of triangulation where the content is the qualitative analysis, but you also need to have your quantitative analysis to show that, for example, when you do the statistics on your items using test taker responses, what you're calling intermediate items, they are actually harder statistically than what you're calling novice items, etc. So these are some of the things that they're going to look at. They look at internal reliability. They look at item facility for each one of the items, the percentage of people who are getting the item correct and seeing if that aligns with where they are on the adaptive test. Item discrimination, if those that get an item correct, usually they tend to have a higher score at the end of the test than those that get the item incorrect. Distractor analysis, distractors are basically those options in a question that are wrong. If we write, for example, a multiple choice question on STAMP4S, you have 4 options, right? One is the key, it's the correct answer. Then you have 3 that are wrong. If there's one option that nobody ever picks, that option is not doing any service to us. It's not helping to distract enough those test takers that don't have enough proficiency in order to get that question correct. So that's one thing that they're going to look at, for example, with the statistical analysis as well. There's quite a few other things. They look at the average difficulty of each one of the items, and very importantly, they look at the routing and the cut score decisions. I'm going to go back a little bit here because we have a certain number of items on the STAMP test. It's 30 items, okay? So everybody who takes the STAMP test, regardless of how well you performed on our proficiency test, you're going to see 30 items. So let's say you started here, then you went up to bin 3, you went down to bin 5, and then you kind of stayed about the same at a bin 8, and you got a certain number of questions correct out of 30, okay? Let's say it's 12 out of 30. How does Avant and its team decide that a novice high starts at 4 out of 30? An intermediate low starts at 6 out of 30. An intermediate mid starts at 14 out of 30. All of this is something that they're going to question us and that we have to be able to explain, given the difficulty of the items and given the alignment with the actual scale. So all of these things called cut score determination, how do we put all of these breaks into the actual scale and the stamp scale? That's something that we have to be able to justify with statistics as well, which is what we're looking at here. And then they're going to look at psychometric processes for speaking and writing. So we have 3 questions on the STAMP4S for speaking and for writing, right? They provide responses to 3 prompts. Once we see what their stamp level is for each one of those 3 responses they provided, we can award a final level for that section based on the results of those 3 responses. But 20% of the time, when somebody submits a response, let's say for French, right? They got a prompt, they typed, their response, in about 20% of the time, we're going to have a second rater that is also going to look at that response and award them a score. So about 80% of the time, there's one human being that is there giving the score to each one of those 3 questions. About 20% of the time, we bring a second one. Why do we bring a second one? Because we're looking at things such as inter-rater reliability. So if Nick, for example, is taking STAMP4S French, which he does all the time, every Friday, you go into our test, Nick is there taking STAMP4S German as well. We want to make sure that it doesn't matter who is rating Nick's proficiency level. It has to be the same stamp score at the end, because his response didn't change. But let's say if I go in, give it a level 4. Roger comes in as a rater, gives it a level 3. Something is wrong. We're not well calibrated as raters because Nick's response and proficiency hasn't changed. It's the same. So we have to run statistics and see the amount of exact agreement. Whenever we have 2 raters rating a response, what percentage of the time do they give exactly the same stamp score? So here are the results, for example, for Russian, and this is straight from the ACE review. These numbers are real numbers that we had to submit. So we ran the stats over thousands of responses that we had for STAMP4S Russian. And in 86% of the time, if Roger and I, Roger and John, Sheila and Nick are rating, 86% of the time, they're going to give exactly the same score. 99% of the time, which is almost 100% of the time, it's going to be at least adjacent. So if I give a 3, Roger would give either a 2 or a 4. This is called adjacent. So either he gives the same one, he gives one below, or he gives one higher. And in basically 4 out of 1,000, those scores will differ by more than 2. So what this is basically showing is that the Avant raters for Russian are extremely well calibrated. This is actually way above the industry standard, which tends to be about 80% of exact agreement between the raters. We have 86. So this is actually hard to achieve, and it's something that we had to provide. We had to provide all of the responses, because if at any point they say, okay, you guys are saying that your agreement is 86%, let me get the ACE psychometrician to look at your data, run exactly the same numbers, and see if we're getting the same numbers as the Avant research team did when they provided the submission, right? So that's the level of transparency that is involved there. So that's the other reason why we use 3 prompts on STAMP instead of just 1. And your final score is dependent on what you get across those 3 prompts. As you can see, the agreement between the raters is very close. And that's because of the processes that we have in place, going back to Mari at the beginning, to make sure that if for some reason a rater is not performing the way that he or she should, we take them out of the rating pool, we give them the necessary training, and only once they've proven that they're able to perform again at the standard that we require, are they able to go back in and start rating again. So if you go to the ACE website, as Dick was saying, you can actually see for each one of the levels on the STAMP test, starting at novice high, all the way to advanced mid, you can see how many credits the American Council on Education is recommending. And this has to be across all 4 sections, as I mentioned at the beginning. And this is basically the lowest denominator that all of those reviewers that ACE brought in across the different languages agree that if a test taker takes STAMP and they score, let's say intermediate mid across the 4 sections, they agree, given their experience teaching Spanish 101, Spanish 102, Spanish 103, Russian 101, French 102, they agree that given the score that they got on STAMP, this is the bare minimum of credits that we are able to justify if they get that at an institution of higher education. So as you can see, this is basically an extra thing that now students are able to get when they take the STAMP scores. As Nick said, it is It's no guarantee, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just a recommendation, but it's a recommendation that has a lot of weight behind it because of the importance of ACE in this grilling process that takes about 3 months that I just went through. So their recommendation is something that universities do take seriously, right? But at the end of the day, you do need students, you do need the faculty advocating as well for the use of those scores to make sure that students' time is used well and maybe spent on other things that they could benefit more from, like language for specific purposes or participating in a study abroad program or something like that, right? So if you have any questions, I would be more than glad. I don't know if Roger is collecting those towards the end, but I hope that this gives you a little bit more information just about the level of transparency and the rigor used in developing and maintaining a STAMP4S test. This is it from me, Nick.
Thanks, Victor.
You
I
are
really
more than
appreciate
welcome.
it.
I'll stop sharing here.
Get back to my PowerPoint. All right. Thank you so much, Victor. So as you can see, getting that ACE recommendation is quite involved. And the reason why we wanted to really go in depth about that is to show that, you know, if you take this to other faculty, if you take this to your registrar's office, to decision makers, you can provide them this information. You can say that, you know, we want to use this to either provide advanced placement for students or for placement purposes, you know, while we're thinking out, while we're preparing to do benchmark testing, because it really provides that guidance. And it's not an end all be all. This is just guidance and recommendations, but it's really good because if students come in with the stamp results from their high school testing that they just did 2 or 3 months before college, then that can be a great benefit to the higher ed programs to bring those students in, put them in those classes. If you start to find that you're having a group of students that are coming, but maybe they don't fit 100% of your program, that's great. You take somebody that was resourced for 100 level and put them as a bridge course. Create a bridge course to continue those students, to prepare them for your program and for your courses. So as we go forward, what challenges do we foresee? It's going to be the same challenges we always see, right? It's going to come down to resources. It's going to come down to decision makers, you know, agreeing to do this. It's going to come down to, you know, possibly funding. So it's really kind of best for programs to work together, for programs to reach out. We're here to help and connect programs. If high school programs want to connect with higher ed programs, we will definitely connect you. Vice versa, if higher ed programs are like, I want to know, these are the high schools that we have kids come from. Do you know if they're testing or what they're doing? We can help you connect that. And I think bringing those connections can really help both programs. They can help the students, it can help the high school programs, because then if they start building these feeder programs, maybe kids stop going to class before they get to AP. But if you can say, hey, come to that AP class, come to that AP class, and we'll get you ready to go to X university, and we'll put you right in that program there. Oh, well, you don't want to major in a language in college? That's fine. You want to do business? Great. You can still take these advanced courses and add that skill. And then once they get them to college, the higher ed programs, they sell them on their program, they excite them, bring them into their program, and those kids decide to stay. It's a perfect win for everybody. Of course, that's the happy path. There's going to be challenges, but you know, these challenges are expected, and it's something that we're used to dealing with. We're language teachers, and we've always had these challenges. We were the first to really take on the proficiency movement, and now other parts of the education world are starting to try to talk about proficiency. We've perfected it at this point, or we like to think so. So it's all about moving forward together. So if there's, we have some questions that we will continue to answer as people type them in. If you have any questions overall that you'd like us to answer verbally instead of in writing, there is the chat there. And we really appreciate you being here. So if please let us know how we can help you and how we can help your programs and help you connect and create these pathways. We're here to help in any way we can. And we appreciate the AATG for working with us to present this webinar to you. So we'll be here another few minutes if people want to stay and ask some questions. If not, have a good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. And hopefully you got some nice spring weather coming to you.
Somebody from Hawaii.
That is
Hawaii.
right.
You got to do the E. Let's see, thank you, and how many languages we can all type. Would actually be fun.
Victor, there was one question about if we are planning to get Stamp WS accredited through ACE. I just said yes. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
I think the answer is yes. We are definitely planning on getting Stamp WS accredited by ACE. And it should happen hopefully sooner rather than later. Oh, I love that people are actually writing the language. Look, Kapkunka, I probably butchered it, but that's Thai. Bulu language from Cameroon. Oh my God, I love it. Akiba Abiu. Is that it? Danke. Salamat po. All right, Nick, Roger, let's see how good we are with those languages. Salamat po. Oh, man. That's a tough one. I want to say Tagalog, but I know we offer Tagalog. Doesn't mean that I speak it. Got some Yoruba.
Yoruba, yeah.
Tagalog, yes.
Muchas gracias. I know that one very well.
Awesome. All right, let me do a little game now. I'll say it and somebody has to type the language. First person, Roger is gonna get them an ice cream next time. Next webinar.
That's right.
Obrigado.
Yeah, but I know a number of people asked, the recording will be sent out to everyone that attended, and there will be a link so you can share with your colleagues.
Good job, Claudia. That was Portuguese. As you can see, we're all language geeks at Avant. It's hard to talk to us at a pub. What we talk about is language. I think this is it. I don't think we have any questions about the presentation. But people are free to send an email, right, Nick, later if they have a question?
Absolutely. And we will be sending out some information through More Learning, and as well as a link to the presentation. So there'll be an option to, and then of course we have the Facebook group for More Learning that people can pose questions. But also if you go to our website, info@avantassessment.com, as well as our website. I put a link in there. You find all the information and you can ask questions. All right. Well,
the Facebook page, Nick, somebody's asking, what is the Facebook page?
Dziękuję. Proszę. Someone put some Polish in there.
Facebook page.
I saw Nick speaking Polish yesterday. It was pretty impressive live with two people where Avant is donating 1,500 books in Ukrainian to Ukrainian refugees in Poland. So Nick and I were in a call and he practiced a little bit of his Polish. That was pretty nice to see.
That was about the extent of my Polish. So.
I think you spoke Czech in a meeting I was on with you once.
Yeah, I know enough to get me in trouble. Is that what they say? Isn't that what you're supposed to say?
Yeah.
So that's also the link to our Facebook page, but also the More Learning Facebook page, where we post other webinars that we do and things like that. So some good resources also to connect with colleagues. Because again, these programs and things like Roger showed, it's all about how colleagues connect. So doing a bridge program, I'm sure the people in Utah would love to connect with whomever to talk about how they set that up and how it's going for them.
Yeah, I would think so. We're very proud of it, and I think that they wouldn't mind hearing other ideas as well. Let's see, there's a question that you two would be better suited to answer than me in the Q&A. Can
So
STAMP help me?
So as
Yeah,
far as
determine.
can it help you determine language proficiency as an A1 to C2? So Victor, do you want to? I have an answer, but I think Victor has a better answer.
I wouldn't be as confident, but let me make sure I understand the question. Can STAMP help me determine language proficiency as in A1, C2? So if you're interested in that range of abilities, I would say that with STAMP4S, you're capping at C1. You're not going to get to be able to assess whether somebody is a C2 speaker of a language or a writer of a language with STAMP4S. Our advanced high basically maps at a C1 on the SAFR scale. So, but yeah, a novice low, novice mid, that would be in that A1 sort of level. So yeah, all the way to a C1, definitely. Nick, do you want to compliment? Correct?
Oh yeah, and for small kids, we do have a Foresee. It is based on the actual scale. So, you know, there's a number of people that have done walk acrosses or kind of align the scales. There's not a huge amount of research on that to really say what those levels equal in the CFR scale. But we do have an elementary version of the stamp that could be very useful for helping to place kids in programs as you describe. It won't give you the CFR level itself, it'll give you an actual level. But again, there are ways you can walk that across to see what that would be.
Exactly. There's quite some research. So for example, Brian North is one researcher that has done quite a bit of research showing how the actual scale maps. It's called the concordancer, maps to the SAFR scale, right? And as Nick said, we do have the Foresee, and the Foresee is actually a really fun test because it is for elementary school kids. So there's like little cute characters, you know, it's much more playful, click here, click there. It's not, we're not going to throw a bunch of multiple choice questions at elementary school kids. So it's definitely more suited to the audience of that test.
The name of the test? Yes, sure, I'll write it for you. It's a STAMP4S and that E stands for elementary, not elementary level where elementary, you know, people like to think, well, I have students that are at the intermediate level. No, elementary means the grade level, kids in the elementary age group.
Yep.
And then I just put a link to our webpage that talks about STAMP. So it'll talk about STAMP4S as well as STAMP4SE. So you can get more information there.
I just saw Köszönöm, that's Hungarian, in the chat. Köszönöm szépen. Whoever typed that, that's.
I knew it was Finno-Ugric. I knew it had to be Finno-Ugric, but
oh,
I didn't
you
know which
write it,
one.
yeah.
Yeah. I was like, it's Turkish or something Finno-Ugric.
Hungarian for me, it's we have a saying where I come from in Brazil. It says, you know, French is the language of love, Italian is the language of food, and Hungarian is the language you use to speak to the devil. That's an actual saying in Portuguese. It's the only language the devil respects because it's so hard, so complicated, so many cases. There you go, Ava.
Yeah, it's a beautiful language, but it's just, you know, all the Finno-Ugrics kind of like when I hear Finnish, when I'm in Russia, I'm like, oh, it just slaps me in the face a little bit. I'm like, whoa.
It's, I love it. Is it possible to ask for a review of a score, Nick? Somebody's asking in the chat.
Yes, it is. Roger, have you ever had to do that when in your experience? Did you ever have to ask for a review of a score, or do you have any partners we work with that?
Yeah, I've had a few. They just have reached out to me, and then I'll communicate that with Mari.
Yeah, so it is possible.
Yeah. There's a case where if they don't agree with the score, they can sort of escalate. It really doesn't happen very often, exactly because of the processes that we have in place and the fact that the final score is based on 3 of the responses, right? But we also, if you go to our website, you have the test retake in the section reset policy. So for example, if a student got a score, but there was a technical issue where they couldn't type on the keyboard and it could have negatively affected their performance, then yeah, we're definitely going to look at that and give them a fair chance of showing what their proficiency is.
Yeah, so we'll be here probably another 3 minutes and then we'll shut it down. So we don't want people to feel like they have to stay on, and they probably want to go have dinner. And it's Wednesday, right? Middle of the week. So I'm gonna have Chicago style pizza, I think, for dinner.
Nice.
Lucky dog.
You should give Erica a call. She's in Chicago.
Oh, that's right. I forgot she was in Chicago.
Have breakfast or something. Oh, except she's traveling tomorrow, actually. It's her birthday on Friday. So pizza is the last chance.
So if you're assessing an entire class, do you give the teacher some feedback on how to improve their students' performance?
So we do have the Power Up guide on our website. If you go to the Avant website, we have one section under resources, which is called the Power Up. And it's a really important document. We have a teacher version and we have a student version, which is basically, it says what the skills are that the students have and the things they're able to do aligned with the actual can-do statements at each one of the levels. And right next to it, it has recommendations of how to get the students to move up. That's why we call it Power Up, to the next level. So if a student got a score of intermediate mid, they are able to see what they're able to produce at the intermediate mid. And we give them clues that the teacher, he or she, can actually bring into a class of how to get that student from intermediate mid to intermediate high, right? By knowing where the students are, and that's one of the powers of self-assessment as well, right? Making sure that the students understand what each one of the levels actually mean, and if their skills actually match that level, right? Because then they can become more self-sufficient. Studying at home, the teacher can craft better exercises and activities in the classroom as well, right? We also offer Advance, right, Nick? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
We offer Advance, which is a teacher, it's a training program to really train you on how to recognize and do more with the proficiency levels at all levels, from novice low all the way up through advanced mid. We also have opportunities with more learning. So the group we're hosting this webinar with, we do webinars, but they also do provide professional development that do specifically what you're saying. They can take the results that you have and work with you on, okay, where are our challenges? Where are we doing well? What are we doing? Why are we seeing this? And they can do things like that. So there are different options and opportunities that we do provide to support teachers, because that supporting the teachers only creates better students, more proficient students.
Yeah.
I've put a few links to Advance in the chat there.
Yeah.
Advance is a great tool. Yeah, it's a great tool.
It's basically the same thing that we use. It's based on the training that we give to the Avant raters themselves who rate the STEM test. And we've decided to make that public so that teachers in schools are actually able to rate in as much alignment as possible with the actual scale and by proxy with the STEM scale, right? Your question, for example, do you provide tools to help teachers, get the students to different levels? The prerequisite there is that the teacher himself or herself understand well the actual scale. Because if they are not aligned in their head, in their actual activity in the classroom, with the types of activities they should be doing to get the students to the next level, everything else would just be randomly trying different things, right? So these tools are actually very important to make sure the teacher understands and then can help the students themselves understand where they're at and how to get to the next level. So I would check out that Power Up guide for sure.
All right. Any other questions before we end this great session? I'd like to thank both Roger and Victor for taking the time to work on this with me, and then the AATG again for the support and sponsoring, helping to co-sponsor this and open this not only to their membership, but the membership of all the AATs and all the different teachers out there. So it's a really important thing to do, is to share between the languages, because only, together we're stronger and we can move the whole field together. So thank you. And as I said, this will be sent out to the attendees and people that registered. So if people that registered but couldn't attend, they will still get a link. And then you can share that link with your colleagues. So thank you again, and everyone have a nice evening.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.